what's special about our cooking is that, we don't have stories about us foraging with like our grandmothers, and I think that's what the food is, and I think that's what the whole thing is about, relationships and about meeting other people and how those people influence you and how you become your own person by all the things that surround you. And I think that's a lot of what the restaurants are about.
You're listening to the Taste Podcast. I'm Editor-in-Chief Matt Rodbard, here with Senior Editor Anna Hiesel.
Today on the show, we have Jeremiah Stone and Fabian Von Hauske, the chefs of a trio of New York City restaurants, Contra, Wildair, and Una Pizza Napoletana, as well as the authors of a new book, A Very Serious Cookbook. Also on the show, later on, we have cookbook author and chef Sohi Kim discussing her new cookbook, Korean Home Cooking. But first, Matt, what was it like catching up with Fabian and Jeremiah, and what are they up to?
Oh man, these guys, they're like building an empire down on the Lower East Side, and it's just cool to talk about these three restaurants that are within walking distance and how different they are, and really just like their partnership in these three restaurants and how that all works. It's pretty remarkable.
And their cookbook is a little bit unconventional, right? It's like a little bit informal, it's fun, feels a little bit like a restaurant cookbook, but it has a little bit of spirit to it.
Yeah, it's like, directors get final cut in like films. Well, they pretty much got final cut in this cookbook. It's a really difficult cookbook for sure. It's not for everyone. It's in metric and not in English measurement, so really has a real chef quality to it. That all said, it's a really cool book to page through, maybe cook from, and it really gives the story of how they think about food, which is kind of amazing.
Here's Matt talking to Fabian and Jeremiah.
Jeremiah Stone and Fabian Von Hauske, welcome to the Taste Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
I love having you guys here. I'm huge fans. You own Contra, Wildair, and Una Pizza Napoletana, the newest incarnation of that restaurant. And you're also the authors of A Very Serious Cookbook.
We are. It's a very serious cookbook.
I mean, it really is. I want to ask you about the book, but first, let's talk about the last time I saw you two in a room. It was at Una Pizza, and I was having an amazing meal. I loved it. I had plenty of things to tweet about. And I think, Jeremiah, you came up to me and said, Pete Wells is here. and you both were like very chill. I was like super impressed by that. So what was happening then when I saw you?
I think, for us, this is our third time being reviewed. It's like, we every day, no matter who's there, we try and give it our best and create the closest thing to what we think is a welcoming restaurant. And I guess you can't do anything different. You can't change someone's opinion. So we put it out there, and then it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, completely. But I was just like, you were back by the pizza oven a lot. I think you were running Expo or working there. What was going through your head?
I don't know. I think I'm just very good at hiding my emotions, but probably I was freaked out inside. But yeah, like you said, I think it's the 9th time that we've seen him in a restaurant of ours. So it was just like,
yeah. How's it going? How's selling pizza right now? And how's the restaurant going?
Pizza's good. We just got back from a little week-long break and came up with some good direction and ideas of we usually take summer to see what's going on and what we can improve and what direction we want to go for the next year essentially. And so that's what we did. We had some good meetings, and we're always evolving. Yeah. All the restaurants are always kind of going through this micro evolution. So that's the case for the pizza as well, and I think it's coming out great. And
yeah, you're packed. Obviously, I mean, you're really you're quite busy.
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty busy. Summer is always up and down in New York, but it's been nice because a lot of people want to show up and support because they've been to the other versions of Una, so it's nice to have a lot of first timers in.
You guys met through Dave Arnold, right? He was working, or tell me that story, and there was like a cryovac machine involved in this.
Yeah,
There's always a cryovac machine involved. Yeah,
true.
Or liquid nitrogen, actually, probably more.
Right.
I don't think he introduced that. Well, when I was reading, I was like, I don't know if he introduced us, but he was definitely like the catalyst of how we came together.
You guys, but you in the book, you write about how you really crystallized your relationship when you were both working overseas, right? Jeremiah, you were in Paris, and Fab, you were at Noma.
Yeah.
And you were meeting online, right? You were chatting after service. I think this is a cool story. Tell me about that one.
Yeah.
We were in a chat room.
Like you boys, like this is a chat room, right? AOL style. What were you talking about in the chat room? Were you like discussing what you'd gone through? Let's roll with the chat. Let's roll with it.
Yeah, I mean, it was just very. I think it was just very hard times for both of us, just being by ourselves in a completely different city, and then I think both of our circumstances were very extreme. Like I was there when they had just became number one, so it was like. I mean, I think to this day it is like the most work I've ever done in like a single day. And I think Jeremiah had just taken a position as a sous chef at this place called Reno at the time. And it was just like, that both of us, like at the end of the night, we're like, it's just
lunch
like, I
and
don't know.
yeah, it was like pretty much 9 in the morning till 1 in the morning, and
like when they tell you that in Europe they work less, they definitely didn't work at these places.
Not these two places.
No. And,
I hadn't worked in restaurants for like 2 years, and it was just kind of like getting back into it, and also I think just not speaking the language, and that was like my struggle. And
you were very honest about it in the writing. I love that. I mean, the story is really good, and you're talking about Reno and how his Italian guy was doing this really cool food, right? And you learned a lot from him. You wanted to probably work at a French restaurant, but you ended up working with this Italian guy.
Exactly, yeah. So I was working with this guy who was he worked for Michel Bras and for Terry Marks, and he was just doing private events. So got linked up with him, and then that job at Reno kind of opened up, and he's Italian, but he'd been working there for a long time, and I was like, I don't really want to work in an Italian restaurant. In my mind, when I had heard there was an Italian restaurant, I was thinking like it was going to be like I was going to show up and it was like like an Italian restaurant that we have here,
like a pasta station.
Yeah, I was like, and we got there, and he was doing very French food with just like his touches, and we got on really well. And his sous chef had just left, and I ended up staying there for a while, just really learning a lot. Also, just from about myself and being there. And we, it was interesting because it was like some of the most French food that I had, but imagine coming from a Roman chef, but it was more French than anything in the States that I could that a French chef had ever prepared, because it was in the moment,
It's a cool thing about food and restaurant cooking is like your passport doesn't really dictate, right? Like who you are in the kitchen, right?
Yeah, I think it's the culture was there, the experience, the surroundings, the product. So it was, I feel like I forget that it was not this classic, French bistro. We were doing a lot of things that were different and fun, but it had the soul and heart of a place, that truly a French restaurant. Yeah.
Let's fast forward a bit to October 2nd, 2013. You both opened Contra on the Lower East Side, and you write very honestly about the style of the food was quite disjointed, and you had often had battles, and you were struggling to find your way. Of course, Contra would be reviewed in New York Times quite favorably, and it would lead to your success. So the story is happy at Contra, but tell me about the not happy part, because I think it's important to talk about your collaboration and the struggle between styles.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just when we opened, I think the two of us, we were trying to find ourselves individually, like what we were as chefs, or whatever you want to call it. And then like what we missed in those first months were like the conversation of who we were as a team and not just as individuals. And I think that first year, even though I think we were always, giving a good product, we weren't telling like necessarily a good story, like all together. And I think it was just after the initial reviews and like just, seeing how the summer, our first summer was kind of slow, so we had like a good time to actually figure out. And we were like, what do we want to do with this restaurant? Like he said, we're always trying to evolve, and like for us, that was sort of like what the next episode was, like, how do we link these two things together? And I think that was just from, like, honestly, I think we both went through a phase when we actually, for me, it was very difficult. Like, every time I made a plate, I looked at it and I saw something that someone else was making. And it's just a reflection of, I think you're just doing what you know. And then you get to that point where you start feeling comfortable, and then you start looking inwards and you start doing things that just feel natural. And then that's when you start doing something that feels very
original and creative.
Yeah.
When you say other people are doing it, how do you know they're doing it? Is it simply through our social media and the way that it flows, or is it because you're dining out?
Well, I think, a big part of it was like we always want to go out to eat, and we're always interested in what other people are doing. And it's just sort of like you just look at a plate and you make it, and like visually it might look like someone else's, but other than that, I think just the idea doesn't feel natural because you try it and then you just feel like it's not you. You just like there's something just about it that you just know that it's not you. It's coming from somewhere else. It's not, and it's not like true creativity. It's just like an inspiration, being inspired by someone else. And I think we both came to that point where we realized we had to start doing things in our own way and like, doing things. So we started, instead of like looking outwards and like what we've done before and like just consider like our own opinions, that's when we started talking about like dishes. And, we would make something and then I would get him to try it, or it was like the other way around, or we would actually sit and talk about ideas. He would come to me and he like, I really like the sauce you're making for this dessert. How can we do it for a savory dish? Or like I was like, oh, you're using peaches right now. Like, what if we use peaches in a dessert like later on?
Is that how you're communicating? Is this just meetings and you're just talking like face to face? Or are you sending each other texts and notes when you're in separate locations?
A little bit of both, yeah. I mean, like I'm always like thinking about different dish ideas, and I'm just jotting it down. And sometimes I won't even give like a reference. I'll just send him a message, and I'll just be like tomato, dried squid. It's like, and I think it's just kind of getting it out there. And oh, what's that for? Oh, for maybe a third course here. Yeah, I think it's nice. We kind of just throw stuff out at each other sometimes.
Let's talk about this book because it is very unique and very special, and I'm a fan of it, even though I've only seen the PDF, just to be honest. But we're recording this before release date. Can't wait to actually hold it. But first off, like, what the fuck? You're like doing metric? That's like metric weights? No.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I mean, we work.
That's crazy, man. I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah, is that good? Yeah.
No, a good thing. Like, this is unprecedented almost for even the most restaurant-y books you have to usually convert. How did you win that battle with your publisher?
I think there was actually no battle.
I think because they're based in London.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're completely fine with it.
Secret.
No, I think having Allison was a big part of it. And
Allison Roman, that is.
Yeah, Allison Roman. And it was just, I think her success in her book and like her success in how she writes recipes was very well translated to the publisher when we were starting. And I think that's like one of the things we really didn't have to fight with, because I think we just told them that we wanted to make a book that, even though it was chefy somewhat and like a restaurant book, we didn't want it to feel like no one could do any of those things. I think if you have the money to buy the equipment you need, you can actually make all the recipes and they're not that complicated. But then there's also some recipes that you just literally need a blender. And
I'll just say this. I'm not sure I fully agree with it being like that accessible, but I don't think that's a problem, because I feel this book it's not just chefy. It's for the most adventurous chefs, because there's chefs who write recipes who don't write recipes like you guys. You guys are writing some of the most creative and coolest recipes around, and it obviously translates to your restaurants. But I also think this book is for anyone who has any kind of passion about restaurants, because it shows how this stuff is done. And I think it really will translate well to a large audience of fans who just love going to restaurants and love the culture of the restaurant. So was that like in mind when you were writing the book a little bit?
I think that when we were trying to think of whether we should make it more, directed to the at-home cook or, for other professional cooks and people who are a little bit more well-versed in the kitchen. I think that our only goal was to not compromise with, how we approach products and how we approach the technique, because at the end of the day, we don't have much going on in the kitchen. Like, some people's home kitchens probably have more, technical equipment than we do. So it's not a kind of book that you need a lot of, special kind of pans and utensils. It's, what we use is what we use. We'll figure it out. The book kind of talks about cooking some things very gently and slow. Like half the time that doesn't even take place in the oven. That takes place on what we call the piano, the front of the French top, or it gets, left on a shelf for 3-4 minutes above the hot top where it's like collecting a lot of heat. So there's, we were trying to figure out, well, the way we do things in a restaurant is not how you would do things in your home kitchen. But, to your point, like, it is, it is approachable. But yeah, when you see how we treat things, you don't have to plate it like that. You don't have to do all the little steps, but it's kind of like what we want to deliver to the guest. And hopefully, the payoff is like things being just a little bit more calculated.
And soigné, like that's what you guys like are super technical with your food. I mean, just looking at the pomme d'arfan dish at Wildair, which is like my favorite dish ever. I've ordered it like 10 times, I think, which is like basically a giant latke with uni and jalapenos on it. But that's like technique, right? I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Like that's kind of challenging to make at home. But if you do it enough,
yeah, I mean, it's a technique that it'd be like the difference would be like maybe if you really wanted to just create shortcuts, you're like, oh, just grate it through a grater or put it through a machine, and
but you're like knife cuts. You're doing matchsticks.
Yeah, and I think that like at the end of the day, if it doesn't look perfect at home, then is it going to taste any worse? No, but I mean there is a lot of the food that we do is definitely rooted in this kind of classic French mentality, and that somehow that translates sometimes into just keeping things very simple and pure, and sometimes it translates into things like the knife work matters because for us it's it's just the presentation, how things cook, make sure they cook evenly, and at home I know you'll be happy. I can't wait to see the photos of everyone making these kind of things, and
they're gonna make it too. Because I'm just saying, like these fans of restaurants want to attempt this food, or at least like look behind the curtain a little bit. I think it's just such a cool book in that way.
Yeah, I think when you make these recipes, you're gonna realize that it's not that difficult to make it, but yes, it's difficult to get it to be how it looks and and all the little details of what you might imagine it to be in a restaurant. But that's the fun part about it is you'll be surprised how easily you'll be able to make it, and it'll taste good, and it wasn't that much effort, but I think you'll just appreciate it a little bit more.
I like the organization of the book a lot because it's not a typical first course, second course, third course, or proteins and vegetables. It's like you have a chapter called Never.
Yeah.
What does that mean exactly? The Never chapter.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, it's just there's like things like a book says, we do a lot of events, and we do a lot of guest chef dinners, and we do a lot of things that we only do like once. And I think that what's special about our cooking is that we don't have stories about us foraging with like our grandmothers, or like we're not in this like rural place where we go and pick.
It's very light on bio. It's very much in the present.
Yeah,
I'd say. Yeah.
And I think that's what the food is, and I think that's what the whole thing is about, relationships and about meeting other people and how those people influence you and how you become your own person by all the things that surround you. And I think that's a lot of what the restaurants are about. And those dishes in the Never section, I think, are somehow like the most important of like the whole thing, because you can see the genesis of an idea, and you can see how we it's like conversations with people, and like those things are become a part of who you are and what the restaurants are. And like we've done a lot of guest chef dinners where we, with James Lowe, when we did a dinner, it's like there's a lot of dishes that we did that one time that were sort of inspired by a restaurant in London, but then a lot of those ideas became something that's very Contra.
So what does the never mean?
I think the never, well, because we had wanted to avoid doing this book that had recipes that were like, the famous da-da-da. Yeah, it's like, the food that we do is always changing. It's always evolving. It's lighthearted. We take the job seriously, and we take the sourcing the products and working with people seriously. But I think because of that feeling of like the menus and everything being, they're so
like nothing's timeless. So
yeah, nothing. Yeah, I mean, like
something sacred.
Yeah, we kept the a couple ingredients and good flavors that we really like to work with. But they always ended up being stuff that kind of maybe the least seasonal of all three sections, and stuff that you can maybe make with dry goods like raisins or dishes that are kind of favorites that like have a focus on protein. Sometimes ended up being, which is like probably like the biggest section, I guess. The sometimes is the middle, and that's stuff that seasonal. Asparagus comes around for a few weeks, nettles, and you see like things come and go. And then the never was dishes that we've maybe done at a special event. Like we did an event with you at this Chinese restaurant that was really fun, and that
was the launch of Taste. That was a launch party.
Yeah, and that dish we never did again. It was it was in the context of that setting. So, we find ourselves traveling all over the world and doing, we did this event one time in Rimini in Italy, and it was like, well, what's the best ingredients we can find there? And maybe not try and recreate that when we get back to New York, because we were using like a cheese that this old lady was making and just bringing it to this little van outside of the market. So, I think the never is sometimes the never is ingredients that sometimes it's hard to find maybe, or they're so seasonal, like we just got one case of these wild plums and never again.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so it's not truly never, it's just the rare and the special occasions and moments. Yeah.
I was trying to pull out some ingredients that I saw mentioned a few times, and I just wanted to do like a little lightning round. Going around with some ingredients and just tell me why are these so dope? First is blue crabs, Maryland blue crabs.
Oh yeah. I was born and raised. My childhood was crabs and in Maryland, just outside of Washington D.C. And we, that for me is like a food. One of those kind of food memories that you don't really. That you kind of take for granted and you don't really think of as, we didn't grow up with a lot of money. We didn't go out to eat. We didn't have a lot of interaction with very, unique food, in my opinion, but the crabs was one thing. I feel like it's in your blood when you grow up around DC that, the difference between male and female crab, what to eat, how to open it, what's a fresh crab, even as a 7-year-old, you can pick up a crab and you're like, that one's a little light. That's not really.
And it's always with Old Bay, right?
Yeah, it's always with Old Bay. I got in a big fight with my family the other day because they're trying to be really healthy. And my father's had triple bypass open heart surgery, so there was no Old Bay on any of the crabs, and I just lost it. I was like, this is my childhood, But and I think that we use crab in the restaurant,
You do, and it's not just blue crabs; it's pico.
Yeah, it's not just it's all sorts of crab. I think if you grow up like that in that area in the Mid Atlantic, you're a crab person over a lobster person. So I didn't really enjoy lobster. I didn't appreciate lobster until more recently.
Later in life.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Umeboshi. I saw that quite a few.
Yeah, I think the Umeboshi is one of those things that they're all the flavors that we're always looking for. So it's a little bitter, but not too much. It's sour, it's salty. And I think we made this butter once. I think that was the first thing we used it for. No,
rad.
Yeah.
Yeah, something that we blended it into a butter and kind of added some liquid to it. So there's like water content, and then we put it in the fridge. So it was like a fridge stable, always creamy butter, and it had all this flavor in it from the umeboshi packed in already. And so we used that on,
steak.
Even just like putting that on top of steak and letting that melt. And that was kind of like the first, fun thing that we did with that.
Let's go to uni. I saw that like a few
Use
times.
a lot of uni.
Lots of uni, and cooking with uni is going to be challenging. But we went through that. Like maybe this isn't necessarily to cook with, but why do you love uni so much in your restaurants?
I think I don't know, it's just that brininess, that creamy, luxurious kind of.
Yeah, sort of like a seasoning of sorts. Like you come up with a dish, and you're looking for those things that are missing, and generally when we use it, we're looking for that like brininess, salty.
Yeah, and we're so close to
again.
We have the Maine uni, which is like such good quality that
you do mostly Maine over Hokkaido.
Yeah, I mean, the Maine uni spawns for a few months out of the year, so I think there's kind of a time and place for all the different types. But
and I think at Wildair we always have it, so it's always part of the conversation of somehow we're always talking about uni regardless of what's going on. So
no, I don't think you're going to lose any fans over time. I think uni is here to stay. I think it's cool. It is a seasoning, the brininess, the unctuousness. It's a cool product.
Yeah, it's not really trendy for us. I think we just
of course not.
We really are always I think we love to use seafood, and the quality of the uni that we get is something that's very controlled. Sometimes you might get okay mussels and great mussels, and I guess the more we pay for a product, the more control you have over it. So
let me hear about working with Allison Roman. I mean, you guys have.
Oh, she's horrible.
I know she's really the worst. No, that's absolutely not true. It's funny because you worked with her years ago. This book has been in the process for a while. Yeah. As well before her book came out here at Clarkson Potter.
Yeah,
and I mean, she's exploded onto the scene. I'm sure this will probably be her first and last collaboration.
She's too big.
Yeah.
She's
too big for you. No,
she's a legend. Yeah.
But tell me, what was like working with her? I mean, she's pretty cool collaborator, right?
Yeah, she's great. And we've known Allison for a long time. She's friends with a lot of friends of ours from like back in the day, like when she was a pastry chef in San Francisco. So we knew her from that. And then when we were looking for someone to write the book with us, we were doing Aspen Food and Wine, and she was there doing some sort of like Instagram campaign for American Express or something. And we just
make that money, okay?
Yeah,
make that money.
And we saw her there. We had lunch with her, and then
we asked her to ride horses.
We went to ride horses with her, and after that, we were just like, oh, what? She said that she was doing a cookbook then, and I knew she had that book Lemons before. And we just started talking about Allison, and
yeah, I mean, I think we knew that. I mean, Allison, she was young and had a very good work ethic, and it just kind of made sense to work with someone that had a deep love for the kind of food that we did, but also wasn't like too much wrapped up in like the restaurant world, or I think having that outside perspective, because at the end of the day, like, that's who would be reading it, or who we wanted to read it. People who, the restaurant people. I think they'll understand all the references, whether you tell them or not. They kind of figure it out. That's the life. But no, it was really nice to work with another person who had a very different kind of skill set and different perspective. Yeah.
You guys are like all over the place in terms of travel, and you have a lot of friends. Like, who are some of your closest friends in the food industry, in the restaurant industry?
I think a lot of the people come up in the book and the stories.
Anyone named James.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about James Henry, James Lowe,
James Scheibut,
yeah. Christian Bauman, Johnny Tam, Christian Puglisi. It's sort of just people who we've always they've always been around like somehow, and we've known all those guys since they were working at another place, and we all met when we were talking about our restaurants and like sort of our aspirations and our dreams. And they just sort of like throughout the years, they just started opening their restaurants. We opened ours. Like James Lowe opened Contra, I think the same month. Sorry, he opened Lyle's. He opened Lyle's the same month we did. And, it's just sort of it's been like an evolution that we've all taken together. So they're very close to us. And
yeah, I mean, I think that that's been a big part of the reason why we can keep the restaurants going is all the time people, like from a very little point, people show up and they say, oh yeah, I'm a friend of James Henry, he sent me, or we send people to Lyle's all the time. But I think also just being able to talk to our friends, even if they're in a completely different market, just our troubles with staffing or understanding food costs, or we're always trading stories. People like Ignacio, Estella, and like Dan Eddy, who was at Rebel. Like, these are our friends that we get together and we kind of trade stories, and it helps to kind of be able to understand better your craft and your job.
You guys are really embedded on the Lower East Side. You got your 3 restaurants are there. I mean, are you just really happy with that location? Do you want to move out from there, or what's like?
Well, I live down there, so I don't want to really walk too much further. I don't. We looked all over originally. I mean, I think we really focused in on the Lower East Side and like that Chinatown area for Contra, and then once we found that, I think we felt at home, and within 15 blocks, I guess, we would look for another location for a while there, and right next door happened to really make the most sense. It opened up. And then the same thing with Una. We looked for different spots, and I think that we know that area well, and we run back and forth and try to cover all grounds, and that makes it a lot easier. But I think East Village is great. It's very saturated, a lot of restaurants. West Village is maybe a little bit, different clientele for us. And then, Chinatown is actually quite expensive. And, we actually were going to take we considered the Mission Chinese space.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the current space that we looked at that years ago. And I thought
they didn't have much luck there before Mission hit.
Yeah, I mean, I think we wouldn't have lasted down there because not enough people knew who we were at the time, and it's pretty, it was a beautiful space, but I think, Contra, we looked at like 3 times, and then it was just like Christmas. It was right before Christmas, and I think Fabian said, I know you already saw that space, but like we just looked at it again, and they peeled off some more of the walls, and maybe we should think about this spot. So
it's really smart. Last question. We always ask our guests, you've just released this book, but what would be the dream second book follow up to this current book?
Pop up book.
Oh yeah, tell me about that. It sounds cool. I like
thing.
The idea. Let's go with it.
I don't know. I mean, I think
I think doing the same book just years down the road and seeing the evolution of it, because I think, like for us doing this book, we looked at when we opened and we saw how we're like, it's very hard to talk about you when you're not that person anymore, and even more when you know that the book is coming out. I mean, we started working on the book 2 years ago, and like it's coming out now, and we're not the people that we even were 2 years ago, and the food that we make is not the food that we used to make. So I think, it would be interesting to just do the same thing, but do it again and see what the perspective is then. And I think what I find interesting about this book and what you said is that I think that what's interesting for people out there is that it is about a restaurant, and it's the story of how restaurants come to be and what they can become and where they go from when they start. And I think the evolution and just seeing what inspires a place, it's fascinating to me. I mean, that's what I love about restaurants, truly.
I think for me, maybe, I thought it'd be interesting to tackle a book that is it's a lot less recipe focused and more about flavors and ingredients, and just, I think because that is how we tackle things is, I think our discovery in doing this book is that we kept coming back to, love, basil and onions, and love, umeboshi and red meat or whatever it is. So kind of just, maybe something that kind of has a lot looser, constraints on how to make things and allow people to kind of toy around and come up with their own ideas.
into it. Jeremiah Stone and Fabian Von Hauske, thank you for joining the Taste Podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Here's Anna interviewing chef and cookbook author Sohi Kim at Books Are Magic in Brooklyn.
So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Sohi.
Thank you.
We're talking about Sohi's new cookbook, Korean Home Cooking. One of the things I'm so excited about this book is that Insa, a restaurant I love in Brooklyn, is so homey and welcoming, and I think there's such a home cooking feel to it. I'm curious to know, in this cookbook, what is the overlap between the items on the menu at Insa and kind of like what you cook at home?
So when I set out to write this cookbook, I really wanted to focus on, obviously, the home cooking aspect. We did sort of toy with the idea of maybe making it based on sort of the entire restaurant and the menu that we have there. But in the end, I wanted the focus that I wanted it to take was on Bonchon. And I don't know if you guys know what that is, and that's the delectable side dishes that you get when you go into any sort of Korean restaurant. And it could be just one, pickled cabbage kimchi, or, it runs the gamut, right? So I wanted to focus more on Bonchon, which I feel is the soul of Korean cooking. So it does have a lot of Insa recipes for sure, but the book starts with Bonchon, and that takes about half the book, I think. So it's very vegetables and Bonchon forward, and then we get into all the favorites, right? People love mandu, the dumplings, and of course the fried chicken and all the other things that are big sellers at the restaurant. But in terms of focus, it is about what is mostly possible for home cooks to tackle. And I think that Bonchon is a really good sort of introduction to Korean cooking. And also a lot of people's perceptions of Korean food right now, I feel like it is very sort of Korean fried centric and sort of late night food, types of dishes, which are great. And I don't knock any of them. And in fact, they're mostly in this cookbook. But I think that a lot of people don't know about how to make Bonchon, how to approach it. And hopefully this book sort of breaks it down and makes it really simple and approachable for people.
I love going to Insa because I feel like every time I go, even if I order the same exact thing, I'm always introduced to something new because the Bonchon is always changing. How often do you change your Bonchon menu?
So we work very closely with a couple of vendors, a couple of farms, and one in particular, I love this farmer. She and I go way back, and in my first cookbook, we sort of dedicate a little a part on our relationship and how we have been working together for a really long time. She cooked at the Good Fork, for a little while, and she went into farming, and now she provides for both restaurants. So whatever she is planting, and we talk about even the seeds, a year prior, we talk about seed catalogs and what she could grow for me specifically. And so in the summertime and especially fall, we're just getting a ton of her gorgeous produce, and we're just, racking our brains to what could we kimchi, what could we pickle, what could we, make into namul and all these other things that I talk about in the cookbook. So that she's definitely an inspiration. And also, it's sometimes, it's basically classic and sort of a modern take on things. So I do want to, just like the menu at Insa, I do want to keep it very traditional and authentic tasting. But there's so much that you could do thinking outside of the box. So yeah, a lot of sort of inspiration and basically what I feel like eating that week.
What's the craziest, totally out of left field Bonchon you've tried? Especially working with this farmer.
Okay, so perilla. It's basically a weed. Do you guys know what that is? It's sort of a cousin to shiso. It's a green leaf, and we have a picture in there. she had an abundance of it, and I said, just, cut it all down. It's ready to go to seed, so just give it all to me. And like 3 people in the kitchen were just, picking leaves off this bush, basically. And we made a soy-based kimchi, and it's one of my favorites. And when we do offer it to customers, they don't quite know how to approach it. And I think that's sort of it's sort of a test, it's sort of a litmus test, at the restaurant when I make a specific Bonchon, whether it's going to be a hit or not. Some people do really love the flavor, but I think that, kimchiing, shiso is sort of a far-fetched thing for some people.
It's a lot of strong flavors.
It is
it's
a lot of
bitter
strong flavors,
and kind of like minty and refreshing, but also the spicy, savory.
Yeah, exactly. So she also had now green tomatoes, right? Before it gets too cold, she's harvesting all of them, and I pickled a whole bunch. And today, actually, this is the banchan of the day at INSA. I took the pickled green tomatoes and I took the kimchi perilla. And I sort of tossed it together with a little sesame oil and some sesame seeds, and it balanced out. So it wasn't as strong. It was a little rounded out and much more palatable, I think. But I don't actually think too much about like what is easy for people to eat. I think that we have a lot of challenge. We have a lot of it's a city full of foodies, right? So I think people want to be challenged and push the envelope just a little bit. I will stop right before, I think, raw pickled crabs, which is one of the recipes in there. It's soy marinated crabs, and it's basically you're pickling it. You're not cooking it at all. So it's sort of pickled, and in some regions of Korea, they even ferment it. So that I would say, no. I'm not going to serve that as banchan. No.
I do love, banchan is such a cool opportunity to try new things, though, because it's like coming to the table automatically.
Right.
The diner doesn't have to make a decision about it.
Right.
And so it's
and
like
you're
a
hungry.
low stakes. Yeah, it's the hungriest part of the meal when you first sit down.
Right.
It's a great time to be adventurous and try.
It is. It's a great. Sometimes I joke that the Korean banchan, like when you go to a Korean restaurant and they sort of give it to you gratis, free. You just have to. Like you can't turn it away. You have to try it. And my husband sometimes calls it the sort of the Far East Asian original chef's tasting menu, right? For us, for cooks to sort of put forth what is seasonal, what is great, and we also think about textural difference, like color, texture, something soy pickle, something spicy, something a little sweet, because it's a balanced cuisine, and we play around with all those flavors. So yeah, it really is sort of the ultimate gift, from a cook. Saying, hey, here's some 5 crazy dishes. Try it before your dumpling comes.
When you cook at home, how many banchan do you usually include? Like, what's a healthy variety to have?
So let's talk about, I think, sort of the essence of Korean home cooking and how Korean people eat at home. It really is about the banchan, right? So sort of a proud Korean cook in her or his refrigerator will have definitely a kimchi in there, right? And something that is, I don't know if you guys ever tried it, it's definitely in here. It's called cuttlefish spicy squid. It's basically dried and it's sort of stripped, and you get it that way, and all you have to do is season it. That will keep for several weeks in your refrigerator because there's nothing perishable. It won't churn. It's already a preserved item. Something like that. And then you will have the section called namol, which is sort of the seasonal fresh vegetables, Swiss chard, watercress, spinach, whatever you have. And that obviously should be eaten, in a day or two. So you just want to have a lot of different variety. And once you make it, it's sort of a Sunday supper, sort of, making it for the week, right? So what I do is, it's not always Sunday, but I sort of devote one day to making a variety of banchan, keeping in the refrigerator. And the other Korean essential is that rice cooker that is always on. So all you have to do is, take a little bit of the rice that is yours to have, and then the banchan is up for grabs, and that's where the sharing happens. And of course, the soup and stew that has to go with the rice. So it really is rice, soup, Bonchon, that I would say is a very typical Korean table.
What's the best rice cooker? Gonna put you on the spot.
Oh gosh, honestly, right now I don't have a rice cooker because they're all broke. I got the Elephant brand. I think it's a Japanese brand. They're pretty reliable, but they're not cheap.
Oh, Zoji Rushi?
That's it. That's the one. Yeah. And then of course, there are some Korean companies that make it with all the bells and whistles, and it's all computerized. It's too high tech for me. So this is what I do. I honestly, in the book, I show you how to make cook rice using a method that my grandmother taught me, which is to stick your clean hand in there and to measure it by where your knuckles are. And I know everybody has, different size hands, but it's sort of an intuitive thing that I have sort of learned, and it's something that even in the professional kitchens that I have, I teach my cooks that way. So I make a pot, and then I sort of keep it in the refrigerator and just warm it up as I need. Because not every day you want, because Koreans eat rice for pretty much every meal, and that's not how we do it in Brooklyn.
That's true. What are the other than marinated and fermented crab, what are the other dishes in the book that you just will probably never see on one of your restaurant menus that are really, really home cooking centric or sort of comfort food
Right.
centric?
So there's some, I think, soups that like the seaweed soup. To me, we dub it the birthday soup because whenever you turn another year older, that's what you should have. Sort of like having a birthday cake, right? Equivalent of that. Not that it's too simple, but I think that it is something if people aren't used to it, they don't really know to order it.
Tell us about the birthday soup. What is it?
So it's seaweed basically, and it's seaweed. Wakame is sort of the Japanese version. That once you soak it, it becomes like paper, really soft and very delicate. And then you could put anything in it really, but I like to flavor it with a little piece of beef. Saute that first, and then it's just beef, water, garlic, the seaweed, and then a little bit of soy sauce and fish sauce. That's it. Very, very simple, but soulful. And it is I don't think you would find this soup. You can some places like way out there in Flushing or way over there in New Jersey, but it's not something that you find too common because in restaurants, because it's definitely a homey dish, homey soup. And there's another one using dried pollock. We Koreans are big on dried things, and that has to do with preservation, right? Just like kimchi is a big art form, derived from the necessity of preserving food through the winter. At the harvest season, you would dry all kinds of things. We don't waste a thing. Ask my mom. So radish tops, even sweet potato vines, you would peel it and you would dry it. So everything is about preservation.
What are sweet potato vines
so
like? What do they taste like?
So you have to peel it, and then you chop it up, you peel it, and then inside, the core of the vine is just very sweet. And when you look at the history of Korea, it's a country that suffered greatly, right, mid-century, with the Korean War and the Japanese occupation, and so it is definitely a culture historically that is about talk about nose to tail, root to tip. We don't waste a thing, and that's something that as a professional cook I do appreciate, that you don't waste anything. So yeah, you find ways to find the deliciousness in something that one might just compost or throw it away, and I talk about that a little bit in the book as well.
Being a chef, you must be so burnt out at the end of the day and so tired of cooking at the end of the day. Do you cook at home? Do you have any energy to cook at home on your days off, or are you just excited to go to Taco Bell?
No, never excited to go to Taco Bell, but
all right, or insert chain restaurant.
All right, choice. Well, I don't know, Shake Shack or something.
Yeah.
It is exhausting when you do deal with food all day. But that's my passion. That's my job. And it is tiring, but I have to shift gears because cooking at a restaurant and cooking at home is so different. And I have 2 little picky eaters at home. And so I usually have, I'm smart about stocking things that they will eat. And they don't eat complicated foods at all. And I did test these recipes over and over and over again at home, and other friends did too. And they would try a little bit of this or a little bit of that and say, oh, yeah, that's good. And then, oh, you want a plate of it? And, oh, no, thank you. Mac and cheese.
That's very polite,
or baked
though.
They're very
That's
polite.
A very polite reaction.
The rule is you have to try it, right? You don't have to like it, but you have to try it.
I want to know what are the recipes in this book that your kids approve of?
The dumplings.
Okay.
I pack that in their lunch, and I think they sort of brag about it, and they trade dumplings for, I don't know, Twizzlers or things, or I don't know what they
that.
do.
The new economy.
Yeah, totally. So they love the dumplings, obviously. Although Oliver, my youngest son, he's like my youngest, is like, yeah, maybe not today, dumplings. So I know they're sort of reaching the max with that. They love. I included some dishes in there that I cook for them specifically. There's a very simple breaded chicken cutlet recipe in there, and that is really for them, and I make that, I would say, at least once a week. There's a noodle soup. They eat the seaweed soup. They love all the soups because it's very mild and it's not very strong flavors, and it's very warming and very savory. So they do like that. Braised short ribs. They like the bulgogi for sure. They like all the stuff that all the customers like at INSA.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. So they're kind of a good testing ground for new dishes.
They are. But, it is I did want to go beyond bulgogi and Korean fried chicken in here, and push it this way and also this way in terms of, really exploring what Korean home cooking is, and then also pushing the limits of, like, okay, if you're a really adventurous eater and a cook at home, how about you try to make, homemade Spam, for instance? So I have a solid recipe in there for that. Korean blood sausage. Have you guys ever tried that? No. So, because it's not everywhere, and you would have to seek it out at restaurants.
I've had it at INSA.
You've had it at INSA, yeah. And Pete Wells wrote about it when he gave us a really nice review when we opened. And I couldn't believe that he wrote about it. And I said, this is surefire way how we sell it. If he writes about it, we could. So it's not the number one seller, but people try it and they're very, very surprised that we even have a tradition of making Korean blood sausage. Hopefully, it encompasses a lot of recipes for, various types of home cooks. And I think the photos are just, that was very important for me to have a photograph for every single recipe because it is so new. And Korean cuisine, I think, is just sort of catching up with Japanese or Chinese, Vietnamese. We're sort of lagging behind a little bit so that, hopefully there's something for everybody in there and that it's a good representation of how Koreans eat.
I need to be sold a little bit on making my own Spam because Spam from a can, honestly, is really good. Like they literally have it down to a science.
It's not knocking it
Tell me
at
about
all.
that.
I mean,
Yeah.
I grew up with that can. You know what I mean?
Do you still buy the cans?
No, I don't.
Okay.
All
right.
So I'm not New York chef snobs. Like, well, I make my own Spam. No, I do appreciate it, and I think it's good. But we could certainly, it's a challenge. I think for professionals to take on something sort of nostalgic and historic and kooky like Spam. Did you know Korea is like the 3rd largest consumer of Spam in this world?
I didn't.
Yeah, next to the Philippines and Hawaii.
Wow.
Yeah, and that has to do with the presence of the U.S. Military there. But yeah, no, my whole entire childhood was about, not entire, but, talk about the Korean table, the steamed eggs, the seaweed soup, the broiled fish, all that stuff was expected on our dinner table at home. But every once in a while, my mother would open up the can, and you know how you open it up with that little key, and then you pop it open.
Yeah, and there's some juice that comes out.
Juice, and then you just plop, plop, plop onto you, and then she would slice it. into these rectangular pieces and dip it. There's a section on Jun, which is sort of fritter section. And so, flour and then egg, and then she would pan fry. And that would be one of the Bonchon. And I didn't get it at all. And I was like, what is this weird stuff? And so I have to fess up. When I was young, I was an incredibly picky eater. So I didn't eat much at all. And my grandmother had to wash the kimchi off in water for me. I know, it's really ironic. My sisters and my brother just love the fact that I cook for a living now, and I make my own spam like I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole when I was 5.
I love the idea of rinsed kimchi.
Oh yeah, it's a thing.
It's a limp, soggy, rinsed.
It's a thing, and all you do. So if you rinse out all the seasoning and the deliciousness, right?
Yeah.
All it is just yucky cabbage.
It's still fermented.
But you just wash it. And I would say just leave it in there for 10 minutes and then rinse it off, and I would put it on my rice. Terrible. So that's why I have 2 little picky ones, and I understand. I get it. And hopefully they won't be stuck in that rut, and I think they won't be.
Before you opened Inza, you were obviously cooking for the Good Fork, and your last cookbook was the Good Fork Cookbook. What are the big differences between that cookbook and this cookbook?
Well, that cookbook came out of this notion of survival. As you guys know, it's a pretty tough climate. Restaurant industry is in New York City, and we had reached the 10th year anniversary around the time when the book came out. But I sort of got in my head when we were hit with Hurricane Sandy, and Red Hook was sort of under, and we had to rebuild. And there was a part of me saying, even if we go out this way, no one will remember the Good Fork. And I saw my recipe book sort of floating as we were, it's sort of a sad story, but that's where I got in my head, like, this has to be documented. The fact that, we're here in this little part of Brooklyn, and it would be great to have a cookbook to sort of, to live on, right, if the restaurant doesn't make it. And we hooked up with a wonderful publisher and a fabulous editor, Holly, who's here, and she got it immediately. So it's a little story about a little restaurant with some, I think, amazing recipes that we have developed over the years. And very proud of it, but it's a restaurant cookbook, whereas this one is a bit more, educational, step-by-step introduction for people who aren't very familiar with home Korean cooking. So definitely very, very different in nature and different in feel. Even though the photographers, I use the same photographers who are amazing, Booz and Zach, and I said it was very important for it to be very visual. So I think that's the approach that we took in making it come alive. That it's different in feel and also different in approach.
You talk so much about the Korean pantry in this book and kind of like how to build that up if you don't have a pantry of those ingredients. Where are your favorite places to grocery shop in New York?
Well, I think H Mart has sort of taken over the Korean. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great thing.
Has anyone here been to H Mart?
It's great. It's on 32nd Street. It's great. There's bigger ones in New Jersey, and there's one in Westchester. They're all over. And I really love the fact that you could just get just about anything there. And they're online. You could order it. So it's not... I do mention how, if you're going to cook Indian food or Korean food, you have to have the pantry for it. But what I think Korean food is different in that it's a very small list. It's a very concise list. And if you have the basics, the soybean paste, the chili powder, the chili paste, sesame seeds, rice wine vinegar, but rice wine, stuff like that you guys have in your pantry anyway. So it doesn't take a whole lot to build up the pantry, but once you have it, you could cook, whatever you want out of this book, and also really fortify your other things that you make. You know what I mean? A little bit of soybean paste, in a braise, or a chili paste in the braise. I mean, it just goes a long way, and you don't even have to tell anybody that you use it. It's just, it's an umami sort of. It's there's some powerful tools, and I think whether you cook Korean food or not, you should have it in your pantry.
Yeah, there are. I have to take you to task about something, which is that you have in your dessert chapter a recipe for a tomato salad with onions. Tell us about tomatoes for dessert. Are tomatoes dessert food? Is the question.
Yes. Tomatoes are it's a fruit, right, guys? It's a fruit, and this. So the dessert chapter is not long. I am not a pastry chef, but I do love sweet things just to sort of, as a palate cleanser, and that's how Korean cuisine is really about. It's about, so when there was a lot of soul searching and going back. I grew up in Korea and I left when I was 10. And so there was a lot of going back into like what was really on that table, years and years ago when we celebrated a graduation or regular dinners or what have you. And I remember that in the summertime we grew tomatoes, and sweet as can be. My mother, after dinner, would just slice them open, very juicy, and sprinkle simply a little sugar and a little salt just to bring out the flavor. And then I would sneak a little extra sugar on there. But it's a piece of fruit that really is delicious at the height and the peak, of growing season. So that's where that came from. And then I embellished it a little bit by adding the tofu cream and some of the onions. And I know onions aren't desserty, but look, it's refreshing. It's like, how the Italians, right? The Europeans, they eat the salad after their meal as a palate cleanser. And I think when you approach that dish, you have to sort of think about it that way. And you could still have something chocolatey or sweet after that tomato salad.
So you're saying you're allowed to have dessert after the tomato dessert.
That's right. Or you could just stop there, But it is, again, it's about introducing something that is not familiar, and sort of putting it in context of, how a culture or how a people deal with various ingredients and sweet stuff. There's some crazy stuff in that section, I know.
I also love, in the drink section, you tell people to cut open a cantaloupe, scoop it out, fill it with soju.
That's right. So this is a thing. If you go to Koreatown, you do a late night thing.
Watermelons,
right? They just hollow it out and then they blend it with soju. And this was a way for us to sort of show off the fact that at INSA we get our soju distilled for us by our friends at Van Brunt Still House, that's based in Red Hook. And so it's just that. It's a play on the watermelon soju bombs.
And how did that come about? So Toki is the soju that's made in Brooklyn,
that's right?
How did a soju creator start up in Brooklyn, and how did you start collaborating with them?
Right. So Brandon Hill is his name, and he founded Toki Soju. And before he founded Toki, he worked at Van Brunt Still House. And so Toki Soju and Van Brunt Still House INSA Soju is very similar, but not the same. And he could go into sort of specifics of how they're different, but they're made in the traditional way that he learned how. He is an American gentleman who spent a lot of time in Korea modeling, which I didn't know. Very handsome dude. And when he was in Korea, he was fascinated with makgeolli, which is the cloudy rice drink, right? And he sort of forged ahead in finding a person who was willing to teach him how to make that in a very traditional way. And then he graduated to make how to make soju. And we all know what comes in the green bottle, right? That's like really inexpensive, and that's what you do when you do karaoke, shots of chamisul. That stuff is fine, but it is chock filled with chemicals and things that it doesn't make you feel good the next day. So Brandon has come up with the recipe of making soju, and I talked to him years before we actually opened the doors to INSA. So I was like, you have to make us our own soju. And he was so thrilled at the challenge. So we sell everything. We sell the green stuff. We sell, the insa soju. But he does a wonderful job.
Speaking of karaoke, how did you decide to have karaoke rooms at your restaurant? Do you love karaoke?
No. I don't.
Okay.
And that was the brilliant idea of my husband, Ben Schneider. He is my partner, both places. He designed and built both places. And we wanted to open INSA because there's not a place like it in Brooklyn, especially in the Gowanus area. So I thought that it would, the market's there, the need is there, and the want is there. I wanted it there. I didn't want to schlep into Flushing, for the ultimate sort of Korean barbecue experience. So it was decided that we would have barbecue tables at this large space, and he would design it. He would get the bar. He could create it however kooky way he wanted. And I said, I just want the dining room very sleek and neat. And my only request was that I don't have those overhead ducts that come down, which are sort of design eyesores. So we invested heavily in this downdraft barbecue tables, which works out fabulous for us. So we had it all sort of laid out. And then one day he wakes up saying, karaoke! And I said, what? And because we signed a lease to this really large space, he thought that we could make private karaoke rooms in the back, and he would have fun building it out. He's a builder at heart, and that's what he does. So it was really his vision of sort of wanting to make it the complete Korean experience. He's like, it'd be great. It's the bar. You have soju there, and then you have this wonderful barbecue meal. You grill at the table, and then you retire to the back room.
It's a perfect night
It
out.
actually is. It's brilliant. It is brilliant. But I did poo-poo the idea because I felt like the food wasn't going to be taken too seriously. But that's not the case. And then Pete Wells came by, and so it was all right.
How did the walls of the karaoke rooms come to be covered in plastic foliage?
So he's kooky,
I
my
love
husband.
that.
He's a dumpster diver. He loves all things old. My house, I can't even tell you. Bird cage, whatever he finds, he finds. So he thought it'd be a great idea to have different theme room, which is a wonderful idea. So the green moss astroturf room you're talking about is actually the jungle room. Because obviously we can't have everything live in there. So there's a jungle room, there's an ocean room, there's a deep space room, there's a psychedelic room, and we put a lot of tchotchkes in there, but they all get stolen.
Oh, that's so
There's
sad.
great lava lamps in the psychedelic room, but they're all gone.
Oh, that's awful.
It's okay. It's
Your
fine.
kids must love the karaoke rooms.
They do.
Do your kids do karaoke ever?
They do.
What are their
a
go-to
lot.
songs?
They sing a lot of Taylor Swift.
Sure.
Dragons, something about dragons. Imagine Dragons. And we, Ben has taught Oliver to sing some Elvis Presley Blue Suede Shoes.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
really
and
great.
I taught my daughter how to sing True Colors by Cyndi Lauper. Yeah, so we sing, and it's fun.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
We have a little time for questions from the audience, but before that, I just wanted to ask if there's one recipe in this book that you really want people to go home and cook this weekend. What's the one that you really want people to pay attention to?
I think it is the obvious one, which is kimchi. I think that kimchi is so easy to make at home. All you have to do is just get 1 or 2 Napa cabbages, and you have it in your refrigerator. And I think I talk to a lot of my friends, are like, how do you make it? It just seems so daunting. And so I think there's this mental block, I can't make anything fermenting because it's just too hard. And it's not at all. So
People have been doing it for hundreds of years.
For thousands, hundreds of years. So it's the national dish of Korea that you should try, and it's very simple, and it's step by step in here.
Thank you, Sohi.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Anna. This was really fun.
The Taste Podcast is hosted by Matt Rodbard and me, Anna Heasel. The show is produced by Gabrielle Lewis, studio recordings by Pat Stango, theme music by Steve Rydell. Interviews are recorded live at Books Are Magic in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn. and at Penguin Random House Studios in Manhattan. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com. Thanks for listening.